as a former student, I have to wonder if you would agree here, but I feel like the education system has been very unfair and not forthcoming with the way that they handle student loans and things like that to the students, where you're involving people who are basically not in a lot of circumstances not really adults and able to manage or even think about finances yet at that point in their lives when they're probably about 17, 18 years old. Even the 20 or someone in their early 20s really doesn't have a clue, and for the most part, how to manage finances.
Well, I mean, whose fault is that, though? It's not. I hear what you're saying, and to some extent, I agree. I think we need to differentiate between private schools and public schools. First off, if it's a public school, yes, I think there should be some level of regulation because it's receiving state funding. Same thing with like federal grants, or not federal grants. I'm sorry, federal loans. I mean, we can discuss whether or not the federal government should be issuing student loans to begin with, but I mean,
ones that can't be forgiven. Those, in fact, you can die and they pass on to your next of kin. Not sure if you're aware of that.
Yeah, I am, and that is something that bothers me. I'm not gonna lie.
So it's the only debt form that can be passed on, basically, or one of the only debt forms that can be passed on to your next of kin and will not be forgiven. Which is interesting because it comes from the government, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to get the rest. I mean, the rest of the point being that, I hear what you're saying, and I understand the argument. And like, I have my fair share of student debt, and I know that I have to pay it off. And when I was younger, I may not have had a full understanding, or I shouldn't even say a full understanding. I didn't care. I didn't care that I was taking student loans because I was like, I'm paying for college. I'm going to college. I don't really care about this right now because I'm in college and I don't really think about this stuff.
Well, and then you have this assumption that it's going to take care of itself. In essence, like, I'm going to get a job getting out of here that's going to pay for this.
Right. Well, but here's the thing. Who ultimately needs to take responsibility for it? I think it's the responsibility of the students. Now, I think the fault lies in the fact that we no longer teach civics and we no longer teach basic accounting skills in school. Like, I learned how to manage a checkbook when I was in fourth grade, because my school had us go on a field trip to this awesome place called Enterprise Village, where we got to go in there as fourth and fifth graders, and we would each be assigned a job at a little company. And so we would go, like, for instance, one year I worked at the Home Shopping Network, and so I was on TV the entire day selling stuff. And then at the end of the day, I got a paycheck, and I could go to any of the little shops around, and I could buy stuff with that money. But I had to write a check for it, so I had to learn how to write a check and balance a checkbook so I knew how much money I had. It was a cool experience, and it kind of teaches you a bit more about that. And then when I was in high school, we did have the school I was at. We did do. We had civics courses. We had courses on American government, on how things work. So that way we had a basic understanding of how this stuff was going to operate. And they don't really do those things anymore. And so you have these, and then you have the federal government saying through Obamacare that you're considered a child until you're 26 years old, which is outrageous, just because you can stay on your parents' insurance that way. But what does that say about us as a culture, that we're going to endorse adolescence until you're 26 years old? I mean, I know 42-year-old guys who are more. I know 18-year-old guys who are more responsible than 42-year-old guys that I used to work with, and that's a shame. And that's really not how it should be. So I kind of question: is it the parents who aren't doing a good job? Is it the fact that we don't teach these things in school when kids are required to go to school, when they should be learning these things, that the parents aren't going to teach them? And I just have a hard time, saying that, oh, the students are all victims. Like, yeah, it sucks. And yeah, I don't think it should pass on to your next of kin. I think that's immoral and unethical. But I don't think it's entirely fair to say that it's, that the students, whether you're 18, 19, 20, or 50, I don't think it matters how old you are. If you're going to take the money and you're going to spend the money, you got to be responsible for the money. And that's something that they should be instilled with from a younger age.
And I agree with you. But in the same way, I mean, that's a great perspective, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but I feel that finances is a very interesting thing. And we all have very we all have very different backgrounds as far as how we grew up. And obviously this is, you know, what I'm saying is from my own personal experience. But, you know, my parents taught me how to, you know, my mom taught me how to balance a checkbook too. And I was, you know, I think I was in my teens, my early teens as well. So it wasn't quite as early as you, I don't think. But so I did learn that. But I for me, when I was going to school, I always had this perspective of, okay, I'm taking out this big loan because I want to get, there's something I want to accomplish later in life, and that's something that I want to accomplish. That job is going to be able to pay for all of these student loans. But what I feel it was not communicated in an appropriate manner, at least to me in my circumstance, and obviously others feel somewhat similar in some areas, is the impact that something like that, taking that amount of money, has on your finances. Now everyone obviously takes a different amount of debt out depending on if you do go to a public or a private school. So and I went to a private school, so it was quite a bit more. But
same here.
You're not thinking in terms of like, basically I'm taking out a mortgage here to pay for my education for a job that I'm not even necessarily guaranteed to get. So there's a certain amount of risk that's involved, that's inherent in doing something like that. You're not promised a job, even no matter how much the school will tell you we have a 95% placement rate. That you're not promised. You may get a job, but it may not be in the exact industry that you wanted to go in, and it most likely will not pay the amount of money that you think that it will. Most entry-level jobs, internships and such, even in the arts, doing design work, is not anywhere near what needs, you know, you need the amount of money that you need to be able to make payments on a loan like that, in addition to you know, paying for your everyday needs, such as room and board, rent, you know, car to be able to get to and from work, transportation, some form of transportation, we'll just say that, and the other peripherals, food being one of them as well. So and I get where you're coming from, because you were saying that you had certain classes that would teach you financials, and I think schools do that to a certain extent, but it's not at least again in my case, it was not to the level of like being able to understand how to manage your entire life financially.
Sure.
And understanding everything that goes into it as far as all these different bills. As a kid, you're kind of growing up and hearing this word bills and mom and dad pay this, but you're maybe not making the connection, like this is real life, and you got to actually figure out where all this money is going to come from. So I guess from that perspective, and I'm not necessarily saying that the system or the schools is purposely doing it, but what I do believe that needs to happen is there does need to be some reform in the form of better education better educating prospective students before they make the leap, so to speak. And then also, to dovetail off of that, somehow regulating the prices of college so that it's not some astronomical number that just goes up 5% every year in the college's favor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, really, I think that goes back to what I said originally. You know, I think we need to differentiate between public and private schools. I think private schools can charge whatever they want to charge, but if they charge too much, people aren't going to want to go there. And that's even happening with state schools here. I know a lot of, like, where I work, I'm not going to name where I work, but where I work, you know, we have a lot of young people in one of the departments in particular that I used to work for. And a lot of them are university students at University of South Carolina here in town. And many of them have taken time off to try and work and save up money, and they just keep raising tuition like everywhere else. And they're just like, I'm not going back to school because I can't afford the tuition, and I'm not going to go into mounds of debt to try and get a degree. And so they're actually doing what I chose to do. And, you know, after I tell everybody for, you know, months and months and months, go to a tech school, get a trade job, because we need trade jobs and they're going to be highly in demand. I finally took my own advice and got a scholarship to a trade school. But I think that that's something else that we should consider, is we have this cultural ethos that we need to all go to college and that we all have to get a bachelor's degree. We all have to eventually get a master's degree. You don't have to do that. You can go to trade school. You can get certifications in IT. You can get trained to be a welder. You can get trained to do auto body repair. And those are skilled jobs that we're going to need no matter what. And they pay well, and they don't cost that much. Like, even if I was paying for these classes out of pocket, which they are expensive, I mean, it's the courses I just took altogether, I think came out to $10,000. Thankfully, I had a scholarship for it. But I mean, $10,000 is like a drop in the bucket compared to what, even the public universities I've been going to are.
Yeah, which is a great point, Dan. And I couldn't agree more with what you're saying there, because yes, I do believe that we need trade jobs and such, because that's very important for the economy, and there's plenty available. It's just people, and I think you're right, because a lot of students, it does seem like that are attending school, or prospective students, are much more awake in terms of this student loan tuition problem, and in a way, you have people from my generation who were not as privy to the information that, I mean, for example, like when I graduated high school, Google was just being founded. It was just becoming something. So we didn't even have the internet or the information access that we have now through companies like Google that we have now. I didn't have access to that. Our library still used library cards. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is there is a group of people at a certain age, I believe probably we classify them as millennials, who fell into that trap, and now the jobs that they wanted don't really exist, because there was a issue with the communication between the schools and the people. And like you said, you don't have to have a college education. Well, there was I'm not too familiar with how high schools are telling kids now, but when I was in school, it's like, you got to go to college. You got to go to college, or you're a failure. And they didn't even, I'm not going to say they used language that was that strong, but that's the implication. That's what's implied by what's said by the teachers. You got to get there. You go to your guidance counselor, and they're like, what are you going to do with your life? You got to do this, and you got to, make this money. You got to figure this out. But it's not in the sense of like, you can still manage your life in a smart way and not take out all the, you don't have to work a crazy, like, specialist job to make enough money to live. Right. And that's sort of the impression that I became to be under, was like, I need to get a job that's good enough to make money to be able to pay for, to live my life. Yeah.
Well, and I never listened to the guidance counselor anyways. I was like, if I want advice, I'll go ask my mom, but I mean, all that to say, I think we mostly agree on most of it, but I think that I think for me, it comes down to the matter of personal responsibility. Like, the system is unfair. Life's unfair. Life's hard. And, we oftentimes, I don't know. I think oftentimes we forget, millennials. I'm going to pick on millennials because I am technically a millennial. A lot of times we want things to be fair. That's why people are out there protesting about how life is so unfair and we're all precious snowflakes. But, it's like, yeah, life is unfair. Things have been tough because we live in the real world where things don't always work out. We live in an economy that is basically that's inflated to the point to where we can't really do much more with it. So things are going to be tough. Things are going to be hard. You got to just buckle down. You just got to do it. But I think that's enough for now. We can come back to this another time.